call the member for Indi.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And in beginning my comments on this piece of legislation, I'd like to acknowledge some constituents who are with me in Parliament today. To the Fraser family, how fantastic it is to have you here. To Brian and Mary and Annie, thanks for making the effort. Mr Deputy Speaker, I rise to speak about the Broadcasting Legislation Amendment Media Reform Bill 2016, and I will be supporting this bill in the House. Australia's regional media has seen a serious decline in recent years, and the rise of digital media has put pressure on all traditional media, focusing companies to seek savings, cut jobs and services, and centralise production in capital cities and larger centres. In my electorate of Indi, there have been some dramatic cuts to media. In 2015, Media Fairfax cut 62 journalists from its papers in regional Victoria, including 23 staff at the Border Mail in Albury-Wodonga. And as recently as this month, there have been another reduction of 5 advertising production positions at the Border Mail, with ongoing outsourcing of work overseas. These cutbacks mean a loss of extensive corporate and local knowledge from among those staff who leave these publications, and diminishing career paths for journalists and media professionals in regional areas. There is also the difficulty of maintaining skills when work pressure is enormous, and we are hearing fewer voices with less experience. For the communities affected, there is a loss of connection with their newspapers and/or masthead, and an impact on how many local stories can be told. In recent years, we've also seen a consolidation of resources within electronic newsrooms. Prime has shut broadcasting studios in Albury, Tamworth, Orange and Wagga in New South Wales, while Southern Cross sacked more than a dozen staff in Canberra and undertook to renew services in Tasmania and regional South Australia. Bulletins have been centralised in Canberra, Ballarat and Wollongong. And we have seen Win TV withdraw its licence from the Riverland and Mount Gambier regions in South Australia, leaving these regions without a dedicated local news service. Win has also closed bureaus in Albany, Geraldton and Broome in Western Australia. And I'd also like to take this chance to make a call-out, a thank you to local media. I'd like to pay tribute to the expertise and professionalism of the many who are involved in local media within my electorate. There are so many journalists who continue to tell the local stories within Indi, and with whom we and my office have built ongoing relationships as we share the region's issues and positive news stories. So a call out. Thank you to Jamie Cromborg and Leah Tyndale at the Wang Chronicle, to Shana Morgan at the Border Mail, to Jan Dean and Erin Somerville at the ABC, Goulburn Murray, to Monique at Albury-Wodonga News Weekly, to Mark Blackman and Ashley Charlton at Win TV, to Josh Matthews and Alex and Helen Ballard at Prime, to Paul McSweeney and Andy Walker at 2AY, to Matt and Lou at River FM, to Libby Price at the Benalla Ensign, to Anne Richley at the Alex Standard and Yea Chronicle, to Pam and all the team at Mansfield Courier. That's just a few to name. So to all the editors, the production staff, the marketing, the camera people, to all the people who day to day ring my office up, help us out, sort things out, we really appreciate your work. We acknowledge your skill and your professionalism. And to the bill before the House. This bill, Broadcasting Services Act 1992, the aim is to repeal the 2 out of 3 rule, which provides that a person must not be in a position to exercise control of more than 2 of the 3 regulated media platforms, commercial TV, commercial radio and associated newspapers, in any commercial radio licence area. To repeal the 75% audience reach rule, which provides that a person, either in their own right or as a director of one or more companies, must not be in a position to exercise control of commercial TV broadcasting licences whose combined licence area population exceeds 75% of the Australian population. And third, to introduce new local programming obligations for regional commercial TV licensees where, as a result of change in control, they become part of a media group whose combined licences area population exceeds 75% of the population. These changes are aimed at addressing the media control and ownership rules that were developed in an analogue era last century, and there is a desperate need for reform of these laws, as my colleagues have said, to ensure that the media laws remain relevant and enable media businesses to compete in a changing media landscape. And the proposed changes to control and ownership rules, I believe, will enable Australian media companies to compete in an environment where new services and platforms are rapidly growing and are not subject to existing regulations. It has become increasingly evident that the rise of online services has had a significant impact on Australia's media sector, and the recent report by the Senate Environment and Communication Legislation Committee examined this bill. It noted how the increase in online advertising services is affecting the advertising revenue on which media companies have traditionally relied. Chief Executive Officer of the Prime Media Group, Ian Ordsby, comments that while online news services such as The Guardian and Crikey and smh.com.au may keep consumers up to date with what is happening in our capital cities and around the world, they don't tell the residents of Launceston, Mackay, Ballarat, or for many in my electorate of Indi, about what is happening in their own towns. He told the Senate inquiry that without some form of consolidation, those living in regional Australia are going to see less local information, less diversity in the voices from our regional areas. Professor Rodney Tiffin told the same inquiry that the 75% reach rule is just outdated. He also said it never made sense, explaining that preserving 25% of others to own did nothing for media diversity and little for localism, and it is well and truly time for this provision to be knocked down or dispensed with. I agree. The WIN network, one of the three covering regional Australia in my electorate, alongside Prime and the newly configured 9 Southern Cross partnership, has offered its opinion at a previous inquiry that the 2 out of 3 cross-media control rule is outdated. The WIN network goes further to say that although the aim of the 2 out of 3 rule is to protect diversity of voice, that in effect all it is doing is constraining the 3 traditional mediums of TV, radio and press. CEO with Fairfax Media, Greg Highwood, told the most recent Senate inquiry that the removal of the 2 out of 3 rule would be beneficial, as in the face of declining revenues and the implications of this for supporting journalism and local content, companies would consider restructuring to achieve a better financial result. From Fairfax's media point of view, the extent to which these organisations based offshore are diverting advertising revenue away from and undermining Australian media companies that invest in local content and journalists and pay taxes is one of the prime considerations for abolishing the current 2 out of 3 restriction. The Labor Party has indicated its support for removing the reach rule, but says it does not support removing the 2 out of 3 rule. It believes doing so would likely reduce the number of owners in the media and risk reducing the range of voices in the Australian media. Again, I refer to Greg Highwood from Fairfax Media, who, when asked about abolishing the 2 out of 3 rule, when asked about whether abolishing the 2 out of 3 rule would potentially lead to a loss of media diversity, replied, "That horse bolted years ago. I mean, there is not anyone there who has access. I mean, there is no one there who has access to the internet that cannot access instantaneously a range of diverse opinions." But particularly today, I'd like to talk about the regional response. So I also acknowledge the important point made during the inquiry by the New South Wales Farmers Association, which highlighted how the media needs of those living in regional Australia differ to those in metropolitan areas. The New South Wales Farmers Federation said many submissions took as assumed that the media landscape had changed substantially for all Australians, and therefore that the old style of mediatorship ownership did not have the same reach or importance for consumers. I agree with the Association's observation that while in regional and rural Australia we seek to be part of the digital age, often communities in the bush are more 19th century than 21st century. Traditional media platforms such as newspapers, radio and television continue to have strong penetration in our regions. We listen to the radio, we watch TV and we buy and read newspapers. So the Senate committee shared the New South Wales Farmers Association's concerns about the ability of regional consumers to access adequate telecommunication services and notes that improved data capacity will help regional media consume engagement in the online environment. And in this area, I'd particularly like to acknowledge the work of my local newspapers to pick up the online presence in my electorate, and how important it is becoming with the links with Facebook and Twitter linking into the regional local papers. It's just making a huge impact. But not everybody in my electorate has access to the internet, and until that day happens, we need to rely on the newspapers. So, among the recent changes and decline in regional media, there has been much good news. Early this year, Nine and Southern Cross announced a new programming affiliation agreement, and as a result of this agreement, they have announced that they will broadcast 15 dedicated local Nine News bulletins from early 2017 to regional markets in Queensland, Southern New South Wales and regional Victoria, and more than 110 staff, including 5 in each of the centres at Albury-Wodonga, Ballarat, Bendigo and Gippsland, will be employed by Nine in its regional news division. The 1-hour Monday to Friday news bulletins will continue local stories, focusing on local communities, dedicated local sport and weather reports, together with state-based national and international news. This is a win for regional Australia, with the Nine News brand extended into country areas for the first time at a time when regional news services have been under significant pressure. And I'd also like to take a moment to talk briefly about the ABC. While the operations within the ABC are not the focus of the reforms outlined in this bill, since 2015 the government has imposed cuts on ABC funding of almost $200 million. The ABC has come under fire for cutting regional radio broadcasts and state-based current affairs, as well as the closure of regional reporting posts and television production houses in Adelaide and Hobart, further centralising production in Sydney. We have in recent years lost the wonderful Bush Telegraph radio show, and the 7:30 report has been nationalised. This year, local radio programming formats were changed so that local news headlines are not broadcast between 9 a.m. and noon. The ABC has confirmed it's pushing content away from traditional radio and television to online content. And the problem is that a lot of people in rural and regional remote Australia do not have access to adequate internet, and we will then not be able to zoom in to this new digital online content. So on behalf of the people of Indi, rural and regional Australia, I'm taking this opportunity to call upon the ABC board not to make its savings on the back of rural and regional Australia. And further, I'm asking the ABC to plan its push to digital to match the capability of its audience to access these technologies. And so, Mr Deputy Speaker, in closing, the broadly held view is the media environment has changed so significantly since the introduction of the 75% audience reach rule and the 2 out of 3 cross-media rule that both rules are now outdated and do not meaningfully contribute to media diversity. In fact, these rules now act to restrict certain media companies from being able to better service the sector, and the abolition of these rules will best serve the industry's future. However, at the same time, we must be mindful of concerns about the character and quality of local content broadcasting following any mergers that will take place, and the Australian Communications and Media Authority's ability to police compliance with local programming requirements. The bill provides for a review of local programming requirements within 2 years of the commencement of its provisions. This will serve as a means of I hope and I believe this will serve as a means to ensuring the quality provision of local media and its coverage of the stories from our regions continues to best service our regional and rural communities.